Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I am super excited to be your guide today. This explainer is actually brought to you by Forge College. So in our last lesson, we really dug into repository patterns and integration and saw how all those systems come together. But today we're going straight under the hood of the Ethereum network to tackle something absolutely fundamental: account state changes and persistency. You see, when a transaction fires off on Ethereum, there's a massive amount of computation happening behind the scenes. But, how much of that computation actually sticks? What's just temporary and what gets permanently carved into the blockchain? Let's dive in and find out.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our agenda for today, just laying it out like a syllabus so we know exactly how we're going to conquer this topic. 1. The hook. 2. Categories of state. 3. Scratchpad, ledger, and commit log. 4. Success versus revert. 5. Real-world patterns. And finally, 6. Trace workflow.
Right, so here is the central conflict we really need to figure out. A transaction executing on the Ethereum virtual machine, the EVM, does a ton of work, right? It's crunching math, shuffling variables, checking conditions, moving data all over the place. But at the end of the day, we need to know what actually goes into the permanent Ethereum vault and what just gets thrown straight into the trash. Because honestly, understanding this difference between temporary computation and permanent storage, that is the absolute secret to mastering EVM state management. Section 1. Categories of state. Meet the files of the bureaucracy.
To make sense of Ethereum's state, I actually want you to imagine the network not as this high-tech supercomputer, but, well, as a super unforgiving, incredibly strict 1950s accounting bureaucracy. In this setup, there are literally only 4 things that the head accountant considers real permanent ledgers. We call this the canonical state. First up, balance updates, so the actual way amounts moving between accounts. Second, nonces. These are those sequence numbers attached to externally owned accounts that basically stop someone from replaying a transaction. Third, we've got storage, the actual contract data that's held in these neat 32-byte slots. And finally, code and contract existence, so whether a smart contract is actually deployed at an address or if it's been totally destroyed. Honestly, if an operation doesn't touch one of these 4 specific fields, the head accountant just doesn't care about it.
Now contrast those permanent files with what we call the transient execution state. This is just your ephemeral scratch space. It includes the EVM stack, local variables, and temporary memory. Think of this as the messy, intermediate math scribbled on a piece of scrap paper. It exists strictly during the transaction execution, and that's it. Unless you explicitly take a value from this temporary scratch space and officially save it into one of those 4 permanent fields we just talked about, it is completely ephemeral. The second the transaction finishes, that scrap paper is tossed straight into the fire.
Section 2. The mental model, scratchpad, ledger, and commit log.
Now that we've met our cast of characters, let's introduce the core mental model that will totally bulletproof your understanding here. And this brilliantly illustrates what we're talking about. On one side, you have the scratchpad, volatile memory, the stack, local variables. I want you to picture an intern's completely messy desk, right? Papers everywhere, temporary math is happening, but none of it is official yet. On the flip side, you have the ledger. This is the persistent canonical state, balances, storage, code. This is the heavy steel vault of permanent records managed by that strict head accountant. The intern can do all the math they want on their desk, but until they physically walk over and officially log it into that steel vault, it just doesn't count.
But wait, there's a third layer to our little mental model, the commit log. So if the ledger is the heavy steel vault of current balances, the commit log is basically the historical filing cabinet. This is exactly where receipts and events, which we usually call logs, are kept. External observers, indexers, they use this drawer to see what happened. But here's the massive catch. The intern is only allowed to file these receipts into the commit log if the transaction finalizes successfully. If the paperwork isn't fully approved, those receipts go straight into the shredder, no exceptions.
Section 3. The drama, success versus revert.
Which brings us to the real drama of the EVM. What happens when the bureaucracy rejects your paperwork? Well, the rules here are incredibly strict. If your transaction is a success, the bureaucracy flushes all those intended ledger updates, we call these deltas, from the intern scratchpad straight into the canonical state. Your storage rights, the SSTORs, your balance transfers, they are permanently saved in the heavy steel vault. But if you hit a revert or an exception, the clerk literally shreds everything. All those storage rights and intended balance transfers sitting on the scratchpad are completely undone. The network rolls back the state as if the intern never even picked up a pencil in the first place. However, and this is the absolute punchline you have to remember, the bureaucracy always keeps the administrative fee. Gas. Even if your transaction hits an error, even if the clerk totally shreds your intended ledger updates and rolls back the state, the gas you spent up to that point of failure, it's permanently deducted from your account. The bureaucracy, you see, never works for free. Your storage rights might be trashed, but your gas fee is gone forever.
Section 4. Real-world patterns, the bureaucracy cheat sheet.
Okay, so how do we actually apply these strict rules to real-world smart contract development? Now, what's really interesting about this slide is it's basically your ultimate blueprint. Let's check out the top row, a simple externally owned account, or EOA, transfer that succeeds. Both the sender and recipient balances change, the nonce increments, but notice there are no storage rights or logs. Move down to a successful contract call. Your gas, transfers, storage rights, and logs, they all persist. But look at that third row, the contract call that reverts. This is absolutely crucial. Balance transfers, no. Storage rights, no. Nonce change, no. Logs, nope. But notice, the gas fee still persists. And finally, a self-destruct operation. The forwarded balance persists, but the storage is entirely cleared out. Seriously, keep this slide in your mind. It maps out the exact outcome of basically every major action.
Section 5. Trace Analysis Workflow. Reading the paper trail.
So, what do you do when you're staring down a massive, complicated transaction trace in a block explorer? Well, here is your definitive 4-step workflow for analyzing traces like a total pro without getting lost in the weeds. Step 1. Scan the trace specifically for persistent opcodes. You're looking for SS stores, balance transfers, or contract creations. Just ignore the noise of the scratchpad. Step 2. Note the final outcome of the execution. Did it end in success or a revert? Step 3. Based on that outcome, mark your ledger deltas as either successfully committed to the vault or completely discarded. And Step 4. Always record the gas charges as persisted, regardless of what happened. If you follow these 4 simple steps, you're going to perfectly predict the final state of the blockchain every single time.
Section 6. The Golden Rules. Conclusion and next steps.
We've definitely covered a lot of ground today, from the intern's messy scratchpad all the way to the heavy steel vault. But if you take absolutely nothing else away from this explainer, let it be this quote right here. Gas consumption is effectively always persistent. The ledger always extracts its fee up to the point of failure. This is the great asymmetry of Ethereum state management. Your storage rights might not survive a revert, your token transfers could totally get rolled back, but that administrative fee, it survives every single time.
Which leaves us with a rather provocative question to ponder, right? We know how the ledger updates work now, but if caller context dictates which ledger is modified, who really owns the storage when different smart contracts start calling each other using complex methods like, say, delegatecall? Well, that is exactly what we're going to unravel in our next lesson, internal versus external account interactions. Until then, thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Remember to visit forge.college to dive deeper into this subject and continue mastering the fundamentals of Web3. See you in the next one.